script. Fix my hair. My YouTube audience.
There you go. You just change the name to no.
Oh,
It's
I don't think I can.
Yeah. Hello, thank you all for being here at Brockton Writers Series. We wish to acknowledge that we do our work on the land of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe here on Wendat and Mississaugas of the New Credit, and that we all have an obligation to consider how we contribute to the silences, the genocides, the colonialism that have affected Indigenous people to this day. We feel like that is a call to action, not just words. And so we hope that you would take them to heart. And that can look like contacting your MPs and MPPs about the issues that affect them. Right now, one of the most important ones is the push through projects like mines that are environmentally devastating. Indigenous environmental stewardship is the only thing that's going to like save the human race from climate change. So I feel like that one is really important. You can also, of course, contribute financially to causes like that. And of course, we would hope that you would support Indigenous artists and writers with what you consume artistically and what you pay for artistically. There's also a wonderful Indigenous journalist that you could follow on social media if you do social media, and just look up APTN if you don't. I don't like to get up here and talk about colonialism without talking about what's happening in Palestine and every international organization calling it a genocide, and North American governments refusing to take meaningful action. So if you've heard there's an arms embargo, it's not real. We're still sending arms there. And if you're involved in the arts, I encourage you to look up PACBI, that's PACBI, which is a cultural boycott of Israeli cultural institutions. And you can look for, what is it called? Writers Against the War on Gaza to get involved. There's a lot of wonderful organizations like Canadian magazines and arts institutions that have signed. We also like to acknowledge that Black Lives Matter, and this is of course an LGBTQ space, so that's really important. And we don't, and we also have it in our mandate to program voices like this and disabled people. So keep an eye on our programming. And we like to thank those of you who are here tonight at Glad Day and those of us who are joining us on YouTube. Thank you so much for being here. Today's lineup will include a guest speaker followed by readers, 4 readers. After the guest speaker, there'll be a Q&A for the guest speaker. And after that, the 4 readers, and then a group Q&A for all of them. And if you have questions for the Q&A and you're on YouTube, please type them in the chat. There's a little bit of a lag, so that will help us. Please don't mind me moving my glasses up and down. I recently had cataract surgery and now I can't read without them, but I can't see with them. So that's frustrating. And yeah, now I'd like to turn it over to Marcy.
Hi everyone. Brockton Writers Series was founded in November 2009, which means we have been in Toronto 10 years. Our nimble Brockton volunteers are Dorian Emerton, Faye Dong, Iris Robbins, Shenia Sestunova, Curious Tobu, Nancy Klager, and me, Marcelo Rivalo. Thankfully, we were able to secure funding the entire 2026 season, so we're happy for that. But we know our funding continues to be cut, and granting institutions like to see individual donations in our budget. So after the break, we are going to have QR so you can donate, see if you are ready to donate. Thank you so much. Also, thank you very much to the Toronto Arts Council. Finally, thank you so much, Glad Day, and to you for being here. I'm gonna go with the first guest speaker. Kirk Matas is a Toronto-based multidisciplinary artist, dancer, actor, poet, and the author of the collection Words Speak and Conversation with a Skeleton. In 2022, he incorporated poetry with original music for his first EP. His poetry also features in his music videos and the 2024 award-winning short film, Coffee Black. Welcome to him.
Okay, so it's over.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? So my name is Kirk Dematis, and I strive to be a poet and dancer and artist. But I think those things, along with anything, it's a lifelong endeavor. You're going to take your entire life to perfect it, or even close to perfection.
We have a clicker for you if you want.
Yeah,
the
we got a
slides.
clicker. So you can press this.
this one. Oh,
The top.
great. Okay. Wish I had this at home. So poetry has been with me since I was young, maybe 8 years old. And I also studied poetry in undergrad. But through studying in undergrad, I quickly realized that the rules did not actually serve me in my creating because I found that it was too restrictive for my writing. Because poetry is an art form, and as such, you should be able to be free to create however you see fit. As human beings, we grow as the world changes around us. And so it only makes sense that as poets, that our poetry should also grow and change with us as well. So if you're like me, you may find that you get a little bit bored doing things the same way all the time. And so what I'm going to be talking about is just some of the ways that I have incorporated into my work to make it more interesting to me, which I hope makes it more interesting to other people. And an example would be like actually in Glad Day, years ago, back when it was on Young Street, I was getting bored actually reciting my poems on the stage because I kept reciting the same ones. And then the next time I was performed, I said, okay, I had a friend who was a guitarist, and I said, hey, can you come perform with me just to make it more interesting? It's more interesting for me, but it turned out it was interesting for the audience. So that was sort of an example of just like, and I'll talk more about that later, but an example of how I tried to make it more interesting, but it also, what that did is it actually ignited my creativity. So tonight we're going to be talking about this topic, shapeshifter, manifesting your poetry across mediums. And so I'll be talking about the various mediums I have used to put my poetry in them and to like give it a new life. Because my interests vary, so it's not just poetry. I studied dance and acting as well. I try to incorporate a lot of those. I'm still working on trying to incorporate dance with poetry, but I'm hoping that maybe this year I can do that. So I think I will go to the next slide. So I don't have to explain to most people in this crowd the importance of poetry and how it can be used to manifest anything that you're feeling or how you want to express yourself. And so prior to writing these two books, dialing back, when I was 15, lived in Markham, and I grew up in a Catholic household and went to a Catholic high school. I was secretly gay, as in everyone knew I was gay, but I didn't. It's a mean, apparently. But I was still guilt-ridden about it anyways, even though I did. But back then I still couldn't actually talk to anybody about what I was going through. I actually recently just saw a friend from high school, and we were reading through old letters that I sent her, and she was saying the same thing. She's like, you could have just told me. It's like, I didn't know I could tell you this. Like, so it's like, yeah, we grew up Catholic. I get that you were afraid. So what I did is I turned to poetry. And so I would write all my feelings down in poetry, but I would disguise them in metaphor. So that way, in case my parents and my siblings came across my poems, they wouldn't know what I was talking about, a guy I had a crush on. They would just think I was talking about like our pet bird, because we had a lot of canaries. So we had a lot of canaries. So they could have thought I was talking about the canary, and I was actually talking about a guy a couple years older than me, which is another story, which I will not talk about. So in my late 20s, I had an opportunity to actually self-publish my first collection of poetry in Wordspeak. And like I took that chance, which I'm grateful for that, because there's opportunities that I passed up on because I didn't have enough faith in myself. Whereas with the poetry, I just kind of pushed forward, like, no, I want to try this for myself. And so and that's what I did. So I titled the book Wordspeak because my speaking voice is, right now you can't tell, but it's normally very quiet. People have trouble understanding me. I have a stutter that comes in and out randomly. So I found that the written word always spoke better for me than my actual speaking voice, which is why I called it Wordspeak. But a lot of the poems in that book were free verse, and I'll talk more about that because it was a live performance a live performance experience that inspired that book to begin with and how I wrote. And then the second book, Conversations with Skeletons, I started working on a year later. And with that, I dealt with some personal demons. I want to use my poetry to exercise some of those demons. But in creating this book, it allowed me to tap into other interests that I have artistically and to bring those to the forefront. So one of the things I remember asking myself while I was writing both books was like, is this the only way I can express myself through poetry? Is it just like written and reading it and hopefully getting published or self-published, because both of these were self-published. And obviously the answer is like, no, poetry is everywhere. It exists everything, no matter what, down to what you're wearing. I think poetry is everywhere. And so I explored that more through my next projects. I was going to say next slide. So poetry is performance. I'm taking a couple of examples. First one on the far left, if you can see it, it's Dr. Maya Angelou. So in 1993, she shared her poem on the Pulse of Morning at former US President Bill Clinton's inauguration. And so for many people not familiar with poetry or not even familiar with live readings of poetry, they could have seen it as just like a recitation. But for me at 14, I was like, this is a performance because it woke me up. At 14, I was like, wow, the way she delivered that, it's something that clicked with me. And then if we skip over to the middle, we have the recently departed Malcolm Jamal Warner. And this photo here is from 2022. And he was reciting a poem and it's called Asante Song. Because he's released a couple albums of his own doing spoken word poetry. And this particular poem was inspiring to me, but I also see just from YouTube that's inspiring to a lot of other people. And it's because he ends the poem with this one line, which it still gives me click. You are the revolution we do not see on TV. And that, I remember that because I grew up hearing another song which has the same line, which is from Gil Scott-Heron's 1970 satirical poem, the Black liberation / anti-Black racism song, The Revolution Will Not Be Televised. So Malcolm Jamal Warner was hearkening back to that message from the 1970s. So just that connection, which I'm not going to talk about samples right now, but I have a whole thing about samples, about how if you sample a certain song, then there's a whole meaning behind that song, and is that why you chose that song? Because then you're adding more meaning. I'm not going to do that, but I just did. But for me, it's like, wow, there's so much more depth to the ending of that poem, because now he's harkening back to this one song, not to that song, and I read all those lyrics. So that just got me thinking about like how you could connect, how words could connect to so many different things and inspire. And what was I going to say? I was going to say something else about that. I don't think I wrote that, but that's okay. So going back to the performance aspect from the first two, Brockton and Malcolm Jamal Warner, my first experience seeing or hearing poets actually share their poetry where it was actually talking about social issues was at a place called Train Studio, which is no longer here, which is waiting for us. I'm including my friend Jeff. And I'm going to mention you. The first time I walked into Train Studio, which was located at Bathurst floor, it was like a jazz club type of vibe. It was low lighting that fell on the shoulders of people who looked like me. And there was a stage at the far back, and it was adorned with instruments. It turned out there was a drummer and a flautist. The flautist is right here, Jeff Kearns. And so I was like, okay, what am I in for? And then I saw the singers get up there and they were performing and getting back. Before I go into there, back when I was 15, I got into music, but I was also writing more poetry. So for me, I was connecting music and poetry back when I was 15. So I would have music playing while I was writing my poetry. So I always had music as an accompaniment to writing poetry. So now flash forward back to Train Studio. I'm sitting in the Train Studio. There's a stage. There's the musicians on stage. Singers get on there and they sing their songs. And then the musicians are accompanying them. But what blew my mind back then, and still does to this day, is a poet walked on the stage. And then the same musicians, and Jeff, it was you, remember it was you, accompanied this poet while he shared, and it was, I can't remember what his name was, but he was sharing a story and the musicians joined him like a chorus. And suddenly, like his poem just became even bigger to him because I remember his face, his eyes just kind of blew because he realized there's something kind of clicked in his head, and then he just grew. So I had that moment in my head. And so what I would do is then once I had enough courage, months went by, I got up on the stage and then I started reciting my poetry. And when the musicians backed me up, I started noticing that I was changing how I was delivering my poems because then I was performing it in a different way. I was adding more words, I was taking out words. I was also experimenting with more breaks and pauses. I was giving the poem time to breathe. But I was also giving the music time to breathe. I was waiting for the music to give me an entrance, and then I would continue the poem. So suddenly now the poem had become something else that I didn't even imagine, because it's live performance. So what I was doing at Train was doing a lot of free verse. And doing the free verse actually inspired me to put the first book, Word Speak, that I mentioned, together because I wanted to do more poems at Train that were free verse that were in my first book. So if that makes any sense. So I wanted to get up there with my book and read all these free verse poems while the music backed me up. So that's kind of how it started with me into changing how I would write my poetry, because now I was thinking about writing it to perform it with music accompanying. So when friends would read the book, they would say, oh, okay, I can actually, friends who went to Train, I should say, who read the book, they would say, oh, I can picture this is when Jeff would come and play the flute, or this is when someone else would come and play the drums, that they could actually picture that there were spaces there for the music to come in. So that's what performing at Train Studio and seeing people perform poetry and music, that's how that that's how that inspired that first book. And one thing that I mentioned earlier is just performing with music and music being a part of it. So I delve into that later, where I try to incorporate poetry with my music, or vice versa. So first, starting with a couple things, before we talk about poetry and music, we have to talk about the influence of rap and hip hop. I won't do the whole history because that's too long, but a couple examples of like some of my favorites are anyone from Lauryn Hill to Black Thought to Mos Def, now known as Yasin Bey. But for now, I'm just going to go a couple examples here. But in 1999, Yasin Bey, now formerly known as Mos Def, released his first, and so far I think it's only studio album, I think it is, solo studio album. And he had a track in there called New World Order, and still funky to this day. But it had a verse in there that it stuck in my head. I can't, I was gonna try to see if I can recite it, but I can't. So I'm just gonna read it. There are places where TV is common as TV, because foreign-based companies go and they get greedy. The type of cats who pollute the whole shoreline have it purified and they sell it for $1.25. And so that, I remember that inspired a couple of my own poems. I'm not saying that they're at level, but it inspired me to write because I wanted to write like that. And then 2 years later, Joe Scott, who's well-known poet, singer, and actor, who also has created some amazing collaborations, poetry and music with Mos Def. She had released her live album, and she included a poem on it, which was more of a live performance called Thickness. And that one was about men trafficking young girls. And she included, there's this one line that she actually repeats. I don't know if anybody knows it, but she repeats the line. She says the line, and then she hears the audience react to it, and then she repeats it again. And then she says, she's been degraded, exploited, not celebrated, saturated with self-hatred. And then the audience got quiet, and then she said it again to kind of get it in people's heads. So again, that inspired me to write a couple poems, and I had music in my head that I could write to it, but I didn't know how to create that music at the time. So flash forward to back 2010 or so. I was preparing poems for my second book, Conversations with Skeletons, and I wanted to try something a little different with the book. And now I'm going to date myself. I don't know if anybody Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna date myself. So in 1992, Madonna released, well, she had a trifecta. She had an album release called Erotica. She had a film called Body Evidence, and then she had a very well-known and controversial book called The Sex Book. And in the book, she also included a CD, a single track CD, which had a song that encapsulated the feeling and the mood of everything you read in the book. And so keeping that in my head, when I was working on my second book, I said, oh, I want to do something like that too. So I went with a friend of mine who has a home studio, and I recorded a couple of the poems. And the plan was to also create music with it and then put it on a disc and embed that somehow in the back of the book. So there'd be like a CD version or musical version of it. But being the way that we were at the time, I got the poems recorded, but we didn't get any music done because we were too busy jamming or creating something, which wasn't music that we could use. So we missed the deadline. So I published the book without the music. So keeping that in mind, flash forward, 10 years later, my second book, Conversations with Skeletons, is celebrating its 10th anniversary. And I started thinking, how am I going to recognize this? I want to do something to recognize it. And so what I did is that, oh, okay, I know what to do. I will take that whole idea that I never got to do or finish, and then I try it again. And so thanks to having a lovely partner who watched our dog, I spent 4 days from Friday night, all day Saturday and night and Sunday, and most of Monday, recording poems on my phone. Didn't work. But I did, and I'm recording the poems on my phone, and then I was composing the music to go with each poem. So that way the music actually captured the same feeling as the poems. And then I put together an EP, which I then have released on, I think it was, here we go. And I released this EP digitally and on other platforms as well. And I put it out there just for myself, just because, okay, I want to recognize that I did this for 10 years. And then what I ended up doing was, when I sat back, like, oh, I did it. I created poetry with my own music this time. Now, I am not by any means proper, like I'm not a musician like most of my friends. I studied piano as a kid. I played drums horribly in a band that I was in when I was younger, horribly, it's a terrible drummer. And I studied the flute in grade 8, but I'm not a musician. I'm not a natural musician. I'm very like by the numbers. Which is strange because I studied dance and I am a dancer, but I'm not a musician. So, but I still create the music anyways. So it is authentic because I can definitely tell I created it. But this is an example of me manifesting a vision that I had without having many resources and without having much guidance. So other than the internet and a couple of friends that I chatted with, otherwise I just kind of did it. And like you'll see, like this is a regular thing with me, is like I don't know how to do something, I will try to do it the best that I can and just do it, other than just not doing it. Because anybody can have an idea, but it takes a lot more work to push that idea through and to make it happen. And it may not be, it may not be up there like Beyonce or whoever it is, but if you don't strive for that, you're not going to get anywhere. You kind of have to strive because you don't know how far you might actually travel by just trying. And so that's kind of where my mindset, where I'm always trying to go further, and you actually end up doing it no matter what. Next slide. So now I'm going to talk about poetry and film. So poetry film is about it's about a century old genre, which I only found out through doing my own poetry film. And so there's countless poets who've experimented with this genre. And two of my favorites are up here. One is Lawrence Ferlinghetti, and this 1968 film is called Assassination Wagon. And it was about the murder of Robert F. Kennedy. So it's pretty controversial because it was tacked on to a comedy series. So I don't know why they thought that would make sense, but it got the attention it did, so maybe that was the point. And on the right, we have Ian Kamal's 2010 film, We Went Out, which talked about Toronto's hip hop scene. It's narrated by the poet himself, so you have that constant like voice kind of leading you through. And I could also mention some other films. I was going to mention some other films, like Dead Poet Society, which is not a poetry film, but it's about poetry. But I did want to talk and highlight one film that's about poetry, but it's not a poetry film. And it's actually a South Korean film titled Poetry. There it is. Wonderful film. I recommend it. Which is it? So this film follows a 60-year-old woman who is, she's told that she has Alzheimer's. She has a grandson that lives with her who is a bit of a handful, to put it mildly. And so she decides, well, I want to, before I lose everything, I want to make sure I have I want to do something I've never done. I want to learn how to write poetry. I want to learn how to read and understand it. And so she goes to these poetry classes, she joins poetry groups, she attends events and slam events as well. But she can't get it until towards the end of the film, where a lot of other emotional things are happening to her at the time. And she finds herself walking through a field and she comes across a giant tree. And on the top of the tree is full, and it's full of apricots. And she looks up at it, but then something catches her eye and she looks down at the ground. And then she sees right down before her, there's one lone apricot just on the ground. And then now she can't get her eyes off and she's staring at it. And then what she does is she crouches down, she takes out her notebook and her pen, and then she starts to write. It just comes out of her naturally. And she writes, "The apricot throws itself to the ground. It is crushed and trampled for its next life." It's something, so for me, I found that beautiful, but also it's simple, but it's beautiful. And that inspired something in me at the time. And this is 2010. I remember thinking, okay, I want to be able to do something like this myself. I don't know how to do it. But I did try. And so what we have here is the way that I've tried to do that. So if you remember early 2000s or so, I think 2008 or so, California introduced a constitutional amendment to same-sex marriage called Proposition 8 or Prop 8. And so and the resistance came in many forms, including the well-known No Hate campaign. And so I was inspired by that, and I wrote a very short poem called No Hate. And keeping in mind the poetry film I just saw called Poetry, I contacted a filmmaker friend of mine, and I asked her, like, hey, how do we turn this poem into something like a film? That's a film that's based on poetry. And we worked together, and she reported me reciting the poem. And then we booked a community center, and we got up early on a Sunday morning. I had some friends and some people I didn't know that well come out early on a Sunday morning. And we painted, I don't know if those who are familiar with the No Hate campaign, they would paint the words no hate on the cheeks. And so we painted that on our cheeks. We had the tape on our faces. And then my friend just said, okay, we're gonna film our faces and just film you reacting. Keeping in mind that your mouth is shut, so you can't react, you have to use your eyes. And then she created some music for me. And then we put together these poetry shorts, literally 35, not even 25 to 30 seconds each. But that alone was like, okay, I have that as a template in my head. And so for years, at least for the last 10 or so, I've spent it creating other poetry films, although most of them are on my external hard drives and backed up 3 or 4 times. But I wanted to still do more. And so during the pandemic, actually the first year of the pandemic, so 2010, a poet friend of mine had talked about, like, he's also really big in film. And so he said, hey, what if we try to do poetry and film together? And so that's what we did. I wrote a poem, and then and I don't know anything about film, like how to do anything, so I had to learn from scratch. And thankfully he studied it, so he taught me a lot, but I also had to get some textbooks. And we wrote a script based on the poem, and then we basically learned how to film it, and we put together a film. And learning from my experience recording my poems on my phone, I mentioned earlier, which I don't recommend, I decided, okay, for this, I want to make sure I go to an actual studio. And thanks to friends who recommended I go to a certain studio to record it properly, so it sounds good. Got to a studio and I recorded it. Now, granted, I have a day job, and that's what the day job is for. It's for me to do the things I want to do, the things that actually fill my soul and make me happy and make me feel like there's a reason why I'm here, other than going to. And so I used that money to fund this project. And so I went to the studio, I recorded a poem, and based on the script that we created, there was a lot of other characters that you don't see on the screen, but you hear them. And so I recorded all these characters. So I got to go back and tap into my acting. Because I hadn't done acting in years at the time. So I got to do some more acting with my poetry. And then in that whole process, we needed some original music. So we actually, let's say thanks to Joe. You're getting all these messages right now. We connected with an artist, a drummer, a musician who performed at Train Studio. So I hadn't seen him or performed with him in well over 10 years. And he came to the studio and he recorded original music for the film. And so we put together our own poetry film, which is still currently in production, post-production. And the reason why it's taking so long is because once again, we're teaching ourselves, or I'm teaching myself, so I'm learning how to do things like color grading. I didn't know what color grading was. Now I know, but I had to learn the hard way by fixing things to over again. Because once again, like if you have a vision, you want to do it, you're going to have to just find a way to do it. And for me, because of show me, I just had to do it the hard way, I guess. But now I know how to do it. So in going through that whole process with this film, another friend of mine who's down in the States had approached me and saying, okay, I know you're working on this project. What would you think about writing a poem for my film? And so he sent me a script. He said, the only problem is that I need you to record it and get it to me in 2 weeks. But as a testament to his amazing writing, once I read it, I was able to write the poem the next day and then book a studio within a week, record it and send it down to him. And when I finally saw it, he actually ended up, I thought it was just used live, but he actually incorporated the entire poem in his film. And now that film, which is called Coffee Black, has been nominated for a couple of awards in the circuit. And so it's currently playing in the States. And so that's not something I would have imagined that I could have ever done 10 years ago, 15 years ago, whatever. But it was just a matter of me trying to create something because I felt like I wanted to. I'm very, very, very adamant that people should create because they want to create, or they feel led to create, or there has to be some sort of reason. It can't just be because someone tells you have to do this, create it this way. Like we should be able to make our own rules. That's the point. We're adults. Most of us are adults. We should be able to make our own rules about how we want to create something that's going to be attached to our name long after we're gone. So actually that brings us to the end of this piece, which is essentially that every time we choose ourselves to create something authentically, we're going to grow regardless of whether people support you or not. By you investing in yourself, you're going to grow and you're going to change. And you don't know what you can do unless you try. And it may not turn out, like I said, like any of those celebrities or something. But by you reaching to go up here, you're still going to bring yourself a lot further, and you're still going to see some success because you've managed to step up a bit. So yeah, that's just a couple of ways how I've tried to make my poetry more interesting to me, then hopefully make it interesting for other people to engage in. Yeah, so thank you for listening.
So, we started a little behind time, but we're gonna have some, no, it's fine. Oh, we get all the other text stuff. Do we have another? No. This one might have. Okay, so we're gonna speak really loudly if we have questions. Who's got a question for her? Q&A. Yes, present.
Difference between poetry and music and song. What would be the difference? Why isn't poetry music a song?
Well, I think it is. Like for me, I've always seen song as like the melody, as the sound that you're singing about, whereas like with the music, it kind of includes everything. But it really isn't that different, really, because the way you sing something could also be poetic, the way you sing it. You know what I mean? Like how you deliver it. So I have friends who have created songs and like they're very sad songs, but they're singing it in a way that's happy on purpose because they're trying to make an ironic statement. So then it suddenly becomes, oh, that's actually kind of good. For me, like, okay, now it's become more poetic in how you do it. So I don't think there's that much of a difference because I think like lyrics, like song lyrics, that can be poetry depending how you do it, right?
But it's not, when it's just like, ooh, baby, baby, baby. Ooh,
Yeah, baby, baby.
Or if you're rhyming, you just don't care, throw your hands in the air, maybe that's not.
Yeah, unless you say throw your hands in the air because you're over throwing
The establishment,
yeah,
yeah.
and it's different.
That is valid.
Yeah.
And maybe poetry, we need not hear melody, right? So there can be music accompanied.
Yeah.
Music.
Yeah, it's,
It does particular music, but it need not be a melody, it could be recited.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
okay. Any other questions? Then you should guys see. You're kidding around. Yeah.
It seems like you had a lot of like talents throughout your life that you like develop and pulled into your creative process, like all different, you did some acting and so you developed that more and you had some foundation for music, so you developed that more. What's the one that you're the most proud of that you like pulled out of your archival experience and developed to use to your creative process?
100% the acting.
Nice.
Because I did music videos for the EP, and for the last video, it was playing a really dark character, and I grew up Catholic. So me playing this, like my mom has not seen the video because I told her you're not allowed to see it because it's a very devilish character. And so I had to really go back to my first acting coach and how he trained me how to get into character and how to stay in the character. And when we were filming it, because we were all friends filming that video, there was joking going on behind the scenes, but I stayed in character the entire time. And I stayed like a really menacing character. And but the greatest compliment I received was a friend of mine saw it. And at the end, like I'm staring at the camera and I'm not blinking. And he says, I don't know who that person is at the end. I don't recognize who that is. That's me. And like he didn't recognize me because of the way I was looking. And I said, that is the most amazing. I don't know how I did that. I don't know. Maybe it's just, but so yeah, acting 100%.
Questions?
Can I ask one more?
Okay.
Films, music, all this requires money, right? So how did you manage the funds? Did you get
Well,
some-
not all of it requires money. A lot of it was that's why we used so for the filming, we used our phones. So even for the film that we're doing currently post-production, we used our phone to film everything. The most expensive thing would have been like getting the Adobe program so we can actually learn how to like actually do the editing and color grading. And then paying for the studio or paying for like musicians to do. Otherwise, everything else was like we made costumes ourselves, or we go to the dollar store, like everything. So like we cut corners when we could. And the things that did cost money is like able to save up for that. That's a paycheck. But it's like a paycheck that was worth it. Kind of.
You said you wouldn't recommend filming with your phone. You said that a few times.
No, we were recording, yeah. Only okay, so I should clarify, make sure you have a good phone because I did not have a good phone. So yeah, I recorded my vocals with my phone, but I used a blanket and I had it over my head to kind of give me some sort of like buffer, but I was getting like my dog walking, I heard her nails against the floor. I heard my partner coughing, so the blanket didn't cover it because you still need to have some sort of soundproof. Filming, yeah, no problem because you could turn the audio off, but like for the recording, I was like, okay, you need a soundproof space for that, and the blanket didn't work. The bathtub worked well until you like accidentally touch something, and then you get it, and you just like, yeah. So like for that, I recommend unless you have a soundproof space, like, just do it. And like they're not that expensive if you go to the right place. Kensington is the best place to go to.
Okay. Thank you so much for
Microphone, maybe. Oh, the microphone is on.
Working. Okay, now we have Jess Paris, is the author of the award-winning fantasy novel, The Winter Night, as well as the Occult Special Investigator series and the Parallel Park series. They are Canada Reads finalists, and their work has been shortlisted for the Lambda Literary Award, the Somewhere Award, and the Rolf Gaskell Poetry Prize. The recent book of poems, I Hate Paris, won the Saskatchewan Book
You turn the volume.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Poetry Prize.
Yeah.
The written book of poems I Hate Parties or
Sorry,
the
it's like-
Saskatchewan book?
See, as you can see, there's a bit of a lag. Type your questions. in the
Okay,
YouTube chat.
we're good now. Yes.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, there is a bit of a lag. It's very peculiar on my screen. There's like an infinity of screens that I can see, but um thanks everyone. Thanks to the Brockton Writers Fest for having me. I'm going to read three poems, and I really enjoyed the presentation beforehand. Just thinking, it's making me think a lot about poetry and hip hop, and I look forward to the other readers as well. This is a short poem from my book I Hate Parties. It's called Speech Delay. 6 years before you arrive at words. Instead, you point and laugh, your face often trembling, between intensities, until the morning you spill every sentence in your oatmeal like wild honey. You point and laugh, your face often trembling, in the mirror as you try on different smiles, pulling expressions from the hidden fascia, then Windex the glass and wipe away each line. In the mirror, as you try on different smiles, the bright outside works your blown glass true. No words in the glory hole, only trembling, sweet bitter plasma, the hiss of understanding. The bright outside works your blown glass true, but a fourth state of matter, between intensities, tries you on, mirror of your motion, wild honey, before you arrive at words or waves or years. That was a short poem, a pantoum from I Hate Parties. Now I'm going to read two newer poems. This first poem is called Before You Dig, and it's about basements in Saskatchewan. If you know, you know the problem with basements in Saskatchewan. It's called Before You Dig. The cat keeps vanishing into your hellmouth. This prairie city breeds monster basements, and she must patrol the trench, singing for her home's bone bed. The plumbers dig past all rational strata, so deep that you barely feel the cut. A dark river of regret breeds peculiar moss in your old undercroft dreams. You tell creative writing students, annoyingly, dig further, but what do you hope they'll find? Shouldn't they hold close some shale of barely visible feeling? Why do you need their grandmothers, their pets unraveling, the sweet tar of their drafts? Moments ago, you ignored your own teacher's note about earth furrows. If you can't afford therapy, AI will dig your grave. Unspent poems trench you from inside, like the cyst that kept you folded still in bed, a bloody bean. Think before you dig, the city pleads, but wilder mistakes need a dive into plush catastrophe. Love caves you, and the washing machine dances on plywood. Dichian, a weak verb that means to mound earth in Old English. So there's slender mercy. Our basements will rise to be mended. All our thefts remade minor mountains. I'm just gonna take a quick drink, and then this is a little bit of a longer poem, but I promise it's not too long. This poem is for all the nerds. It's called My Autism is Lawful Neutral. When you dream of dragons, they impart nothing useful, just a few scales on your sheets. A wizard is a corpse flower, blooming terribly on their own schedule. A wizard is red cellophane laid over a cheat manual, so just the right words come into focus. A wizard is a stubbly kiss that smells of jasmine and binding glue and books under the bed. A wizard is an eye with narrow depth of field, staring delicately at a puzzle above your shoulder. Gandalf wreathes you in pipe smoke until you become the red underglow of their vellum, gristle of gossip they'll pass around the Shire. A Gandalf is a drawer whose velvet stays indistinguishable from night, and you can reach into it forever. A drawer is a wizard who can't speak at parties, but loves fireworks and stylish disappearances. If you move a Monopoly piece across an imaginary board, a clinician will read the spell on your skin. If the Guild of Necromancers could just remember your email, they'd invite you to their mausoleum, the delicate plots with night-blooming flowers, the taco truck. Everything you've heard is probably true. A wizard's scruff profile says, "My autism is lawful neutral, and no man has ever inquired about this." Our profiles are minor cantrips. They hold our calamities and loose change, our shame like unraveled measuring tape, the snore of the sleeping ducks in the park, when you warmed your hand under his jacket and he gleamed like witchlight, but he was a knight, you always knew that. We cast off these spells, old receipts, and wonder what becomes of them. One lost in the mail, one used to grease a faulty elevator, one grave good, one banned book, one curiosity of fungus on an otherwise usable lens, one mixtape recorded underground, one for sorrow, and a last one that says break in case of apocalypse. Thanks, everyone.
I played Dungeons and Dragons once. I was lawful good, I think. I was a Dragonborn Forge cleric. I wouldn't like do it again, but I really did, have a lot of fun with it. And I think it was really good for writing, right? Like, yeah, for writing. I thought I'd do the little intro now. Do you guys have the QR code you can throw up? Yeah, perfect. So now that we're reaching the world with our very own Brockton YouTube series, YouTube channel, we would really like your help to make it official. If you could like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, it would help it would help the algorithms, the algorithms that it get out there and get into people's eyeballs. So if you could subscribe to our channel, that would be great. If we get enough subscribers, we get our own URL. And if you could just scroll back and like every single video, or at least, afterwards, like this one tonight. That would help with our algorithms. We have the QR codes up here where you can pay what you can to help us out. As we said earlier, we did end up getting funding thanks to Toronto Arts Council and Access Copyright for the rest of our year. But Arts Counting is, yeah. Actually, Copyright Toronto Arts Council coming in clutch. But we know arts funding is precarious. So, our next season, which starts in September, we're still going to need money then, and we don't know what the funding looks like. And if you've ever applied for a grant, you know that they don't like to be your only budget line. They like to see you're getting donations. So we also have this pinned to the top of our Insta. So if you're on Insta or Facebook, you could share our donation campaign. If you know any very, very rich people who'd like to be patrons, like in ye old Parisian salon days, we'd love a patron. And then the other one is to follow us on social media, because the followers also help get the eyeballs. And now for our next three readers. Leslie Shimachakahara is the award-winning author of 3 novels and a memoir, as well as numerous short fiction and essays. She won the Canada-Japan Literary Prize and has been shortlisted for the K.M. Hunter Artist Award. Her 4th novel, The Breakwater, will be published in April 2026 by Cormorant Books. Leslie!
I don't.
Thank you, Dorianne, and thank you to the Brockton Writers Series team for inviting me, and to all of you, of course, for coming out on this. Thank you for coming out on this rather chilly January evening. I'm going to read from the opening of Sisters of the Spruce, a novel inspired by my grandmother's vivid tales about growing up on the Queen Charlotte Islands, now called Haida Gwaii. Although she lived there with her family in the 1920s, I chose to set my novel a few years earlier at the end of World War I, when these remote islands in northern BC were first being opened up to the world due to the Allies' campaign to acquire Sitka spruces for their fighter planes. The logging labor force was largely Asian and Indigenous, as well as white. In these opening pages that I'll read, the 14-year-old heroine, loosely based on my grandmother, arrives on these islands with her two sisters as night is falling. Over the course of the novel, dark adventures will befall them, including seduction, unwanted pregnancy, and sexual violence. It was late by the time we got there. The sky had turned into a large shadow, which crept this way and that and threatened to become all I could see. But animal alertness was keeping my brain bright awake, my limbs restless. It made no difference that Dad kept telling me to sit still. My legs dangled off the pier. There I sat, nestled between my two sisters, as we all waited for whoever was supposed to be coming, our eyes fastened on the glistening black water. Early that morning, from the deck of a steamship, I'd watched everything receding and shrinking. The cluster of clapboard houses, the store, the saloon, the white cross of the church. Fare thee well, Prince Rupert. As I looked back at the town, icy spray settled on my cheeks, and it all flattened into a thin gray line and vanished completely. Then there was nothing except choppy waves, capped with white foam. The roar of the engine filled my body. On the ship, time juttered by. I went inside. I came out again. In, out. I'd been in this position before. Salt shower making me hoarse. Wobbliness in the gut from nothing solid to stand upon. But somehow it was worse this time around. We were starting all over again, once again. This time we didn't even know where we were going. My eyes stared out at the colorless waters, cresting and breaking with a force that came from someplace invisible, relentless. The feeling had become all too familiar in recent years. At some point, May came to join me on the deck and grabbed at my palm. Warmth from her hand flowed welcomingly into my body. It'll be nice there, won't it? Her voice faded in the wind. Yes, nice, very nice, I think. I tried to sound confident, but what did I know, really? We'll live in a real house again, not a basement. I looked down at May's petal-like face and nodded, not trusting myself to speak. In Prince Rupert, Dad had been a janitor at a down-at-heel hotel, in exchange for which we'd been granted a couple rooms in the basement. It had been a sad existence compared to our lives before in a bustling mill town called Skeena. How frightened my sister appeared, barely daring to hope. She was only 7. I adored her, and she expected me to be her big sister, so I forced a smile. We'll get a lovely house again with a large front porch. What will Oto-san do for work? Although May spoke less Japanese than me, what few words she did have, Oto-san, Okasan, she clung on to fiercely. Dad will log and fish again, and you'll play in the forest every day, and everything will be just as it used to be. You wait and see, but no more questions for now, all right? She went inside while I watched an albatross get flung across the sky like a tattered flag. Nausea, fierce as an earthquake, came in spells that shook the walls of my stomach. Toward the end of the journey, it got worse than ever. The water suddenly all aswirl, as though a great fist were pulling us downward toward our seabed graves. Then the fist released us, the waters calmed, and the seagulls, always the seagulls. You knew you were getting close to port when the flocks of gulls descended, swooping down so low that if you dared to stand outside, you had to protect your head. And then a harbor came into focus. Canoes lined the beach, boulders rising high behind. The clouds were streaked with moody violet, their upside-down images reflected upon the glassy surface. It was the last and only stop. The few other travelers were getting off, so we did too. We watched their backs shrink away from us, blurring into small dots in the distance. How I envied them for having purpose in their gaits, clear destination. As we sat on the edge of the wharf, the sky darkened, engulfing us in shadows. At last, the wood slats vibrated. A thin fellow with a weedy mustache and not much hair was approaching with a stiff wave. He was dressed in an old, crumpled overcoat and mud-spattered trousers. Without saying anything, it was clear that he was here on behalf of the company. Mr. Brown, he said his name was. We'd have to walk to the Indian village, he said. Without asking any questions, Dad began to follow him along the beach under the last ribbons of dim light. And so we made our way too, me behind Dad, Mum and my sisters straggling at the line's end. All our worldly possessions were in the bags we carried. In the distance, a smattering of bleached out houses could be seen blurrily on the shoreline, and a single totem pole shot up, like a wave of a skinny arm. Mr. Brown led us to the largest house, which had a long veranda, newly painted white. He told us to wait out front while he went inside. A few minutes later, he came out with a tall Indian man who, except for his caramel skin tone, didn't much look like an Indian at all. He was dressed in a fine dark jacket with a matching vest beneath, the silver chain of a pocket watch secured to one of the buttonholes. His hair and mustache were more tidily groomed than Mr. Brown's. Apparently, this fellow owned a boat and was going to be our skipper for the rest of the journey, down the strait into the inlet. They haggled. It seemed the price had gone up since last month. And there were more people in our family than expected. And we were late. It wasn't going to be easy to navigate in the dark, now was it? While the Indian stood his ground, Mr. Brown got all blustery and red in the face and threatened to leave us all there. The Indian remained unperturbed and said we were welcome to camp on the beach. Bees abuzz in my gut, I looked over at Dad expectantly, but he appeared pretty powerless. Back hunched, his eyes did not stray from his feet. Mercifully, Mr. Brown relented and thrust over a fistful of cash. We followed our skipper down to the water's edge. His boat was a small schooner with white sails that caught the wind easily and, like giant moth wings, carried us along the current. The feeling thrilled me while at the same time unsettling my stomach, the black forest on both sides getting even blacker as the sky turned to somber flatness. The trees were higher out here than any I'd seen before, their trunks thicker too. They formed a fortress around us, a fortress topped by daggers or pointy teeth. Mr. Brown's face relaxed a little. You folks do speak English, I assume. Of course we spoke English. Why else would the company have hired us? Of all the yellow men in this part of the world, you wouldn't find anyone who spoke finer English than my father. Yes, sir, Dad said. I even taught language class back in Japan. You're pulling my leg now. Mr. Brown shook his head, his eyes brimming with curiosity. When did you move here? Over 20 years ago, if you can believe it. My father smiled, more a smile of exhaustion than pride. His hair was thinning, the cobwebby lines beneath his eyes more apparent than ever. Too many sweaty days under the northern sun had left their marks on him. What about your wife? She speak English? His chin wagged toward my mother, seated beside me. Yes, well, some English anyway. Then why ain't she answering for herself? Cat got her tongue? I watched the back of Mum's head, her glossy hair still neatly swept up in a bun, barely a strand loose, even after so many hours of travel. The white ruffles of her high-neck blouse peeked above the gray shawl. She'd wanted to wear her best clothes to make a good impression on the company. We'd been under the impression that the company consisted of some very important, very rich white men, not this slouchy guy who smelled of tobacco and last month's laundry. I gave my mother a gentle nudge. Yes, yes. This came out as barely a whisper from her lips in Japanese. So she ain't mute after all. Mr. Brown laughed, a drop of spittle flying. Don't really matter though. Don't need to speak in order to cook and clean. My wife is indeed an excellent cook. The boat began to rock. We were passing a drift log spit and a desolate beach where an old canoe had been left on its side to rot. Your name's Sam Tarata, said Mr. Brown. Sam's not a Japanese name, though. Well, it's Sanosuke, really, but people have been calling me Sam for years. You're one of Will Henderson's guys, correct? Yes, sir, Dad said. You met Will back in Skeena. That's right. Will says you can be relied on. Not that Skeena's an example for anything, make no mistake. Skeena had gone belly up. It still upset me to think about all my family had lost there, the consequence being we'd had to move to ugly Prince Rupert. It had been 3 years since we'd left Skeena when the American company that had owned the mill had pulled out. I wondered if this man had lost big money in the venture too, but then he smiled, a reckless, fast smile, shaking off his mood. We're here now, my friend. That's what matters, right? And there's plenty of work to be done taking down these beauties. He gestured at the shore, at the molasses shadows. The government's pouring money into it, big money. Did Will tell you the news? Dad gave a small smile while remaining quiet, attentive, like he didn't want to deprive Mr. Brown of the chance to gab on about something that clearly delighted him. These Sitka spruce, here on the Charlottes, are the only trees in the entire British Empire strong enough to build our fighter planes from. Their wood refuses to splinter, even under a shower of goddamn bullets. So everybody's counting on us now. Thank you.
Sorry. That was awesome.
Right. We have now Maurice Belepu. He's a Toronto illustrator and cartoonist. His work has appeared in major magazines, books, and advertising for 40 years. His graphic memoir is I'm so glad we had this time together, won the Toronto Book Award and the Trio Book Award.
Okay, I'm gonna,
Oh, and this also? Yeah, I can figure out this.
so the chapter I sent didn't arrive, the flowers of romance.
Oh, shoot, sorry. I do have it, yes, sorry, I'm so sorry.
Please bear with us.
Do you want to?
Yeah.
Oh, why don't I take this moment to remind everybody or let everybody know that there are books for sale from all of the authors who are here in person. Leslie and Tamara have them on their person. Maurice's are downstairs in Black Day. You can buy from Black Day. So reading materials to take home.
So my book is called I'm So Glad We Had This Time Together. And it's a graphic memoir that I wrote and illustrated. So it's a big fat book, 500 pages of drawings and writing. And it's the main thrust of it is about growing up queer in a very, very strictly religious world. My parents were Dutch immigrants, and they were part of a church called the Christian Reformed Church. And it was very, 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 very strict, and queer people were not really welcome into this world. And my sister tells me that I came out of the womb screaming. So there I was, and so the couldn't really accept me as being queer, and that led to a lot of pain and estrangement between us over many, many years. And yeah. And the chapter I'm gonna be reading from is called Flowers of Romance. Have just come out to my sister and to some friends at art school. I'm in art school. I'm going to Ontario College of Art. So let me just make sure I'm doing this correctly. Here we go. Now that I was officially out, I was ready, eager for experience. I wanted someone to sweep me off my feet. Hey, want to suck me off? I got a 7-inch dig. What? No, that's not what I want. I run home, I take a glass of water, and then I have a chance to think about it a little bit. And I'm like, well, maybe I do. Just wasn't quite prepared for that. Come on. The problem was no idea how to get started. Bohemian guys. Some of them even seemed like they could be gay. But in art school, you can be legend Eddie Shack. Larger than life and way too intimidating. Take a look at the 17 paintings I did last weekend. And here's 5 more from last night. Mostly a decidedly
Okay. Okay.
It's not advancing.
Oh.
There we go. Okay. I think we missed something maybe.
Oh.
Happened.
That was the.
Okay, sorry, yeah. Mostly a decidedly macho atmosphere. Okay, so we did see that. Outside of art school, a rich, bewildering variety of approaches to sex and love were to be observed. Paul and Martin, some older gay men that I've met, for example, were involved with the Toronto gay paper, The Body Politic. Scott, Gerald, this is our friend Maurice. The Body Politic crowd had put heteronormative views of coupling on trial and found them wanting. So you're the artist. Paul has told us so much about you. The trailblazing body politicers had created a paradise of guilt-free sex with endless partners. Maurice. Let me introduce you to our host, Walter Dahl. He's going to love you. Romance was bourgeois imposed patriarchy, though some, like Paul and Martin, chose monogamy. Walter, darling, let me introduce you to our friend. I was attracted to some of the BP clones, but hopelessly ill-equipped to navigate their world. You must come back for dinner à deux sometime. And perhaps a photo session? Maybe. Then there was the world of the Bloor cinema. Ingrid and I went 3 or 4 times a week. Ingrid is my older sister. Ingrid, look, there's that cute guy again. Cute? That's the 5th time in a row. I have got to meet him. So what are you having? I don't know. I could never decide. Can't I just have a bite of yours? No. Hey, he's friends with my friend Fiona's sister. She's the ticket lady at the Bloor. Sheila? So my friend Fiona introduces us. Sheila, this is my friend Maurice. He wants to ask you something. I love your hair. Thanks. What's up? Well, you know that Asian guy who comes here all the time? Yeah, his name is Winston. Stick around after the show and I'll introduce you. Hey, hurry up, will ya? Wait your fucking turn, asshole. I'm talking to my friends. Oh, keep your money. It's on the house tonight. So after the screening, I've been introduced to Winston. Wasn't Satyricon incredible? Yes, Fellini is just God. I still think Roma is my favorite though. Oh yes, the Papal Fashion Show. Winston, ready to go? Oh, hey, you should totally come out to Domino with us. I'd love to. So here we are in a goth club in the early 80s called Domino. The band Fad Gadget is playing in the background, and the song goes, takes hours of preparation to get that wasted look. A more detached take on sex held sway in the nightclubs. Diffident, cool Andy Warhol was the presiding deity. Just like at Andy's factory, posing was in. Kids experimented with androgyny, bisexuality, and celibacy. Morrissey's quip, don't have sex if it bores you, resonated for many. Of course, this take it or leave it attitude was tied up with drugs. Have you seen Winston? No, I haven't. He's in the washroom. Hey, oh, okay, thanks. I go to the washroom and I see Winston is shooting heroin in one of the stalls. What's up? Oh, nothing. I think I'll be going now, that's all. It was great meeting you. We should hang out again soon. That'd be great. So I'm on my way home in the bus, the all-night bus along Bloor Street. And these two creatures are the warring sides of my brain, and they appear throughout the book. We decide that Winston is not the boy for me. You're in way over your head with this. On top of everything, romantic delusion was a theme of the weighty 19th century novels I was consuming in an effort to augment my mostly unacademic art school education. In second year, I befriended an unusual couple, and here I'm going to the now defunct and actually torn down Larry's Hideaway, which was a grungy bar for music in the 80s. Just go back. So I met this couple. The guy, David, was in a punk band called Polkaholics. The Polkas often performed with Queercore Legends' Fifth Column, an all-lesbian punk band. The girl, Frederica, was a talented printmaker with queerish preoccupations. Hi, Maurice! What? I said hi, Maurice! She created a witty Oscar Wilde paper doll, but complete with a prison stripes outfit. Polkaholics are up next! What? Polkaholics are, oh, never mind. Fred and David lived together, but they were in an open relationship. David had been writing me long, amorous letters filled with stories and gory-esque drawings. Only dimly aware he wrote such letters to everyone, I was blindly swept off my feet. Alas, just like in a novel, obstacles stood in our way. Where to be alone, for example. I longed to swoon in his daylight-deprived arms, but not in a filthy Larry's Hideaway hotel room. I lived in a constant, miserable state of unfulfilled longing, familiar from childhood. The impasse with David dragged on for months. Deirdre, my friend from art school, in particular, was sick of hearing about it. So here we are in a my first gay bar. Eartha Kitt's song is playing. It was a huge hit, and it always conjures my coming out in my mind. I don't wanna be alone, where is my baby? Chew my fingers to the bone, where is my man? You have to imagine it more gravelly than that. Waitressing our way through art school, Deirdre's social world consisted of an ever-changing cast of gay actor model waiters. So, what do you think? I really like Michael. Out one evening with a bunch of these, we'd been barred from Cornelius because of a strict no women policy and ended up at the barn. Oh, good, because he's coming over here. See ya. Having fun? Yeah, you? You're very cute, you know. Thanks, so are you. Feel like coming over to my place? I'll tell Deirdre we're leaving. Finally, I get to kiss a man. You know I'm a verb. I figured it's okay. Have you heard about this new gay cancer thing? My friends have been talking about it. It's scary, isn't it? Wow, this guy had a huge fish tank the whole length of the bed. Relax, we won't do anything you're not ready for. Morning. Hi. Last night was amazing. Thanks for not insisting. Nothing wrong with cocksucking. You didn't come. Next time. You know what? You're young. You should get out there. Have lots of experiences with different guys. Huh? But I'm having such a nice experience here with you. Deirdre had been masterful, orchestrating my first time with no preconceptions or expectations. It was incredible. Oh, Mauricia, I'm so happy for you. I felt intoxicated, awakened, greedy for more. Are you seeing him again? We're going to a movie Friday. A week or so after that, I arrived at the college to find what? Class canceled. Downtown with nothing to do, I decided to pay a visit. Surprise visit to the house Michael shared with a couple of roommates. I imagine his delighted reaction to this unannounced arrival. Little devil, get in here. Knock on the door. Oh, hi. We met at the barn a while ago. I'm Michael's friend. Is he home? Oh, yes, come in. You must be frozen. Thanks. Michael has a guest. Come in and have a coffee and warm up. How do you take it? Just milk, please. Have it in my room if you like. We could talk. I've got to be going. So here I am, my job is, I'm a janitor at the Christian school that I attended as a child. My dad was the chief janitor in the school and he hired all us kids to work there. So this is my chance to think about stuff. So the boys are going over the situation. Obviously, you weren't enough for him. You failed to capture his imagination. But the sex, this guy is the exact physical embodiment of your fantasies. Don't give up so easily. Give it a chance. Much better to find out the truth now and avoid more pain. Don't see him again. And here comes the title song of the chapter, The Flowers of Romance. I sent you flowers, you wanted chocolates instead. Just because he was with another guy, that doesn't automatically mean he doesn't like you. You don't know him at all. The flowers of romance. But remember, he tried to tell you to move on that first morning, not to get too attached. Have lots of guys. Okay, don't see him again. Sure, the sex was amazing, but face it, you're not in love. Think what sex with love would be like. A few months later, Frederica was away. At last, David and I had time together, alone. Slurp, slurp. In Fred's mother's basement apartment. David turns over. Pant, pant. I get up. And he doesn't react at all. He just turns his back to me. I shamefacedly put on my clothes. I'm going now. Bye. Wipe my mouth. And soon I'm at Deirdre's apartment talking about this situation. Don't tell me. It was all over in a few minutes. Am I right? How would you know? She fucked him too. You too? How could you? It was a long time ago. It didn't mean anything. God, what a jerk. I know, men, huh? Oh, your first love. That's the end.
Oh.
All right, now I gotta go back up to the top. We have Tamara Young. Oh, I didn't, I didn't do you weren't here in time for me to do a pronunciation check. Is that right? Okay, John. Tamara Jong is, and I don't know how to pronounce that either, Tiyotake, Montreal-born writer of Chinese and European ancestry. Her work has been published in literary magazines and long and shortlisted for various creative nonfiction prizes. She's a Writer's Studio graduate and lives on Treaty 3 territory, which is Guelph, Ontario. So thanks for coming all this way. Worldly Girls is her first book. Ta-da! Yeah.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, Brockton. Thanks everybody for coming and everybody online. And thanks to all the amazing readers so far. So I'm going to read from Worldly Girls. Is there anybody that speaks French here? I apologize in advance. So I'm going to read from my memoir. It's Saint Fear's Father's Origins at Diptych. I'm an Anglophone, that grew up in Montreal. So my French is not 100%, but There is obviously, when you live there, it's kind of like there's an English-French thing. So this is about my life growing up as a Jehovah's Witness and also as a mixed ancestry person of Chinese and European descent. And it's a little bit about, kind of my reveling of my faith, among other things. So I'll start. It was unbearably hot and humid the summer I returned to my hometown to see Brother Andre's heart. Canonized as a saint after his death, Brother Andre was known as the Miracle Man of Montreal, a Catholic layperson who believed in Jesus' ability to heal, and who himself was known for performing thousands of miracles. I went to see him the week before my 51st birthday, and the drive without working AC felt like hell if I ever believed in one. I felt called to go to Montreal. My therapist told me that sometimes you have to go backwards to go forwards. And I needed to see versions of my past self, to witness the old and the new and what remained of my faith. I wanted to trace the past by visiting the places that had scared me as a child. Had I really become the type of person hoping to see Jesus in our multigrain toast? I took 283 sweaty steps up Mount Royal because the thought of taking the shuttle bus up to St. Joseph's Oratory seemed ridiculous. I marveled at the devotion of those who recited a prayer while crawling up the 99 steps marked, reserved for pilgrims who go on their knees. If the devoted could go upstairs on their knees, I could surely walk up a mountain. I hadn't planned for my trip to be so very Catholic. Being taught that other religions and their churches were part of Satan's Christendom had made me uneasy. But pursuing religion in general was predictable for a former Jehovah's Witness like me. I was curious about people's attachments to idols, even though we were taught to believe that giving veneration to any religious image was wrong, actually. Once I found a tiny Jesus, Mary, and cross hidden within a secret compartment in a used wallet I had bought at a thrift store. And I tossed the whole thing in the trash just in case it was possessed. I don't think it was. While in Montreal, I also visited St. Patrick's Basilica, the Musée des Salles de there you go, Miss City, and the Historic Canadian Museum, and it's now a pharmacy. But we had the statues of the New Testament's 4 evangelists, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and they were still guarding the outside. The museum had once been a wax museum that had an exhibit of Christians being eaten by lions. As a child, I was utterly terrified of it and begged Ma not to pass by the mutilated faithful. The convent was a place across from where I grew up. As children, my brother, sister, and I were afraid of what happened inside these places, but had no idea what that would be. We did know there was a disembodied heart, wax dummies, and mortal women in habits. My great aunt was a nun, Sister John of the Cross, and had penned some lovely letters to me, even though I was of a different faith. Honestly, what could any of these people or objects really do to me? I did know to be scared of my parents' anger, the way it ripped into our lives with little warning, the violence, the yelling, the leaving. I loved God, but his wrath, images of fire and swallowing of the wicked, and the upcoming war of Armageddon were burned into my child's brain. If these prophecies came true, I wouldn't be sailing into paradise on Ma's coattails. Being a child wasn't an excuse. I had to carry my own faithful load. Was my devotion and faith to Jehovah built on love or fear? And was there a difference? They say that baby ducklings imprint on the first things they see. In my baby pictures, my face is serious, unsure, smiling cautiously, facing the person holding the camera. Most likely my father, but it was Ma I was attached to. She often punished me for getting in trouble at school. It started in kindergarten and continued to grade 1. I couldn't lie to her. She was trying to turn me into a God-abiding, dress-wearing, perfect little girl, a follower of Jesus Christ. Getting Ma's approval was love to me. I was 2 when Ma asked for us to be removed from the Catholic baptismal registry because she no longer wanted to be considered a member of their church. I don't remember anything that had to do with the St. Patrick's Basilica where I was baptized. I didn't even know the Lord's Prayer, what a Hail Mary was, or how to make the sign of the cross. Ma didn't speak much of her past Catholic life, choosing not to look back. We were very active in our newly chosen faith. She made sure I knew Jehovah was always watching, but she didn't have to tell me. I felt it. When I was 6, Brothers Andre's heart was stolen from the St. Joseph's Oratory in the middle of the night and held for $50,000 ransom. The church wouldn't pay. The heart was later recovered via an anonymous tip. It reminded me of the pickled brain held in Dr. Frankenstein's lab in the haunted house at Park Belmont, the one that gurgled, "Help me." Before I went to see Brother Andre's heart, I took a walk in the Gardens of the Way. I came across the sculpture of Jesus at the 3rd station, where he fell for the first time, and it unexpectedly affected me. I wasn't prepared to have feelings about any of these places, and now in the garden, I felt heaviness in my body, each step I took. If I had been my old praying self, this would have been the time. But which God would I pray to? The one at my first baptism or the God of my second? I saved the reliquary of the basilica for last, and that's like where they keep kind of the relics, apparently. When I got there, it was still daylight, quiet, and there were few visitors. The gates, thick glass, and an iron grille with a few handwritten prayers tucked right into it, all separated me from the saint's heart in the jar atop a marble pedestal. When I looked at the urn, its contents were cloudy, and my reflection just stared back at me. I had seen the many scenes showcasing Brother Andre's life, his white iron frame deathbed with its pencil-thin mattress, the crutches that had been left behind by the cured faithful, his tomb and his original humble beginnings, but his heart was invisible to me. I was too afraid to ask the faithful pilgrims nearby if they could see it, because after coming all this way, I didn't want to be the one that couldn't. When one has not had a good father, one must create one. Friedrich Nietzsche. When Ma kicked out father, I was 15. She'd had enough of his affairs, and he'd had enough of her drinking and breakdowns. We kids honestly welcomed the quiet it brought. We heard that my father had fought to see us, but little kid sources are suspect. After he left, he would take us to Burger King, just like in those typical after-school TV shows. We went to his apartment once, a small place he shared with his friend Johnny. His clothes were lying all around the place. He gave us his phone number scribbled on a piece of paper so we could reach him. Later, we would only have the phone number of the restaurants he worked at. He would drop by to see us sometimes, but he didn't take us to his place ever again. "Don't call me daddy," he warned us when we were out in public. We wondered if he was part of a gang or if he had another upgraded family. He did. We wondered, our ability to separate fiction from reality protected us from the truth we weren't ready to see. When I was 11, I took a short hiatus from the Jehovah's Witnesses after being brought up in the truth since I was 2. To bring me back to the fold, Ma thought it would be a good idea for Tommy, my little brother, and me to study the Bible with a young family from our local Kingdom Hall. At first, our studies were a joke. We wouldn't pay attention or we'd miss our study times. Then during one of our Tuesday meetings, I finally made some important connections. I felt like I began to understand the prophecies and how they applied to the last days. It was a time of clarity for me, a first in a series that would culminate in my baptism and commitment to Jehovah God. I felt warmth and calm within, whereas before I'd been unfocused and without purpose. My beliefs and relationship with him were now steadfast, and I wanted to serve him forever. You can never go back, to that one moment when you thought you knew everything. And once my parents split up, my father didn't seem as interested in us or me. So it was easy to replace my earthly father with a different kind of father, one who promised to always be there for me. He was the Alpha and the Omega, a God without beginning or end, and he felt real enough to me. So it didn't matter if I didn't know what he looked like or even where he came from. After all, the Bible told me in Exodus, "For no man can see me and live." The Watchtower told me that God was too powerful to be viewed by human eyes, that we don't see gravity or electricity, and yet they exist. I was young, I was lost. The language gave me a sense of belonging, meaning, and community. My relationship with God was the main constant in my life that kept me whole. I had finally found a father who would never die or leave me. My father doesn't talk about himself or his family much. I often ask too many questions, and I push the limits of his patience. Should I stop, I wonder? It's taken me so long to get the courage to ask him anything. Like my father, the mirror doesn't tell me who I am or where I come from, but religion had taught me not to question. The answer would be revealed in God's due time. Faith would always have to be enough. I don't know the exact moment I started wavering from my religion as an adult. I had been an obedient member of the congregation and its doctrine, and I rarely questioned its truth. I see now that I needed the Jehovah's Witnesses, that I had nowhere else to go, that I needed to feel safe. I had planned to return. I had hoped that therapy would send me back fixed and improved. Instead, I ended up questioning my beliefs and whether Jehovah even existed. Anger at God now, deep within me, quickly turned to doubt and disbelief, and I wonder now if Ma's sudden death all those years ago was a catalyst that would eventually lead to my leaving. All I know is faith made me see, and then one day it didn't. Thank you.
Don't go, don't go, don't go. We need you all back up here for the Q&A. Q&A. We're gonna bring some chairs so you can sit during that. Sorry, Marcy. Maybe you can donate your chair to the cause. Yeah, all right. Okay. 3 is good because we got one online. Okay. And yeah, we don't have that second microphone, right? Okay. So in order for the people on YouTube to hear, maybe you can kind of like precede any question that you get. So we have somewhere else. All right.
Awesome. All right, questions. Table's open for questions. It can be for everybody, or for one or two of them. Maybe you've got, okay, so I'll start. What's wrong with Saskatchewan basements? Okay.
Oh man,
Okay.
we just don't have enough time to really cover what's wrong with Saskatchewan basements. But essentially, the soil is made of clay. It's always shifting, and so there's just the sense that your house is gonna slide, and and uh, and that's why I use that metaphor of the Hellmouth from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Like everyone's basement in Saskatchewan is kind of like a Hellmouth.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it was difficult in moment like we have a funny strictly difficult to share in that moment your experience. So how did you decide to make the book? You know, in the moment, like you decided it was difficult for you, or it was like, yeah, I need this and make it. How did you take the decision?
Yeah. So the decision to write the book came about because I needed money. And I had been an illustrator working in magazines and advertising for many years, and in the early 2000s, all of that work started to just dry up. And by 2012, I was in kind of like a midlife crisis where I was like, what am I going to do next? And during all that time, I had been writing comics, short comics for Drawn and Quarterly, which is a publisher in Montreal. And I always enjoyed it and loved comics. And then I just thought about my life and how kind of eccentric and unusual it is growing up in this Dutch Christian bubble. So I went to a Christian school where all the other kids were children of Dutch immigrants. And we went to church twice on Sundays. We went to a catechism class one evening a week on top of Christian school. And so we looked like other people, but we we weren't other people. We were very, very specific, weird, closed world. And then just the conflict about the sexuality. I just thought this is maybe there's something here. And so I wrote a pitch and sent it to an editor that I knew at Pantheon Books in New York. And he said, oh yeah, this is for us. And soon after that, I got a Canada Council grant, and that brought me glorious time to just work on it. So again, thank you to the council gods that we have in Canada. I know we're supposed to thank them, but I am incredibly grateful to live in a country where this kind of thing happens. The Americans that I speak to all the time are like, what? So no, that's how it came about. Yeah.
So I want to kind of like,
So I don't know if this was part of it, Marcy, but I'm also thinking about the like, did you have, and this is for, I'm gonna expand it to everybody, like, did you have family who's like gonna find out about your sexuality by this book? And was that hard? And did you have to come out to them first? And like, Jess, you also write about like queer sexuality. And like, did you have any like Jehovah's family who was gonna find out? And like, I don't know if there's anything like that for you, but like, like your family's gonna read this. The people you've known your whole life is gonna read this, and they might think things about you. Is that hard?
Yeah, I can start with that, I guess. My novel was very much inspired by vivid stories that my very eccentric maternal grandmother had shared with me since childhood. And she was very outspoken. When I would go perhaps for a week in the summer to stay with her at her little bungalow in Hamilton, Ontario, she would just talk all day. And she was often, you know, sort of criticizing my grandfather, who was right there in the same room. It's just like he had sort of retreated into Buddhism, actually, like as a means of just sort of, I think, bypass, sort of spirit, what we now know as sort of spiritual bypass. He would just sort of go into the room where he had his little Buddha shrine and close his eyes. And then in the next room, my grandmother would just be telling me like everything about him, about how he had been hitting her from time to time in the early days of their marriage and how she had left him a couple of times. And sort of cautionary tales around, you know, you have to have your own bank account if you get married because you may need to be planning your exit strategy. And so I guess I've always just sort of taken her as kind of my role model in a way, even though I'm a very introverted person. Um, yeah, like when it comes to sort of putting pen to paper, it wasn't hard for me to sort of connect with her voice. Yeah.
So I didn't start off reading memoir, I actually started off writing fiction. So I think but it was thinly veiled, or not even thinly veiled autobiography stuff, really. So I think for me, I guess I was trying to write for that one reader that would kind of get it. And I tried not to think of like everyone that was going to read it because it is hard. I think I was a little bit scared at first, not even actually of my own family. It was more like the Jehovah's Witness, like component. So because I'm not disfellowshipped, which means you're shunned, I kind of left just by what my husband calls a loophole, just by drifting away. And so I was not really associated with them anymore. So I do have some family in it. I try not to be so afraid of what they would think of it. Most of the feedback I'm getting is actually very good. So I try not to think of all of them on my shoulder. And then with God, well, the whole thing was very defeating. So I just kind of wrote, and then I had a lot of mentors that kind of helped me like work through things. Because like I said, I didn't like plan, I was never writing. It's just to write fiction. And then my teacher, once I started taking nonfiction courses, it just kind of, it started, she said, why don't you write something like, it was a young, just Savari, and she said, why don't you try writing like letters to my parents? And I said, it feels very daunting. Because at this point, I'd only started in my writing career, so I had two things. So I was like, you know, and then I just kind of let it go from there. But then the stories start kind of telling themselves after a while, right? And some of the things, honestly, I couldn't even make up. Like it was good, like for my parents. So, and once I started talking to relatives, right? So I kind of just wanted the truth to kind of present itself the way that it was. And I tried not to heavily censor. Of course, there's always, you know, as you know, anybody knows, there's stories that we'll probably never tell, but that's okay, right?
So I was out to everyone by the time I started this book, in my family, certainly my extended family as well. So that part wasn't hard, but yeah, the pitfalls of memoir writing are wide and deep. And particularly, you know, my mom was not happy about this book because of her intense Christianity. and her faith and her, she was a very, very private person, and she knew that a lot of family stuff was going to be exposed. Um, so yeah, she passed away before it came out. So you know, good good on her for that. And, but also I'll just, I mean, that's a, you know, that's an off the cuff thing, but what I will say about her was that she knew that I was working on the book and she was dreading it. But every time I asked her stuff about our family, including really intimate things about her marriage, she would be there and she would tell me, and she would be very honest and open. And I think deep down, she kind of had an inkling that this book was important for people in this situation. I think I kind of feel that. So I'm very, very grateful to her for all the help she gave me. But then, yeah, then you've got your siblings and stuff too. And a lot of people I tried to, a lot of people that appear in the book, I would, if I was concerned about how they felt, I would show them the material. And in one case, I showed this guy who is kind of a major role in the book. And I said, you know, read it over and tell me what you think. And if you're not comfortable with it, I'll change your name because nobody's going to recognize you from the drawings. And he said, oh, yeah. So he read it and he said, I love it. It's great. Please change my name. That's that.
Jess?
So I didn't really hear the first part of the question. Does it just have to do with like how queerness and memoir?
Oh,
Yeah, about if there's sensitivities or apprehension about family, friends, and people reading things that are kind of intimate and personal and true about you.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, I I feel like yeah, books of poetry are kind of they're tricky because they can kind of slip in and out of meaning and they can be very metaphorical. So sometimes you can get away with stuff that maybe you wouldn't be able to get away with in a straightforward creative nonfiction narrative. That said, like, yeah, there are definitely poems in I Hate Parties where I did tell people that, you know, this poem is about you and it's being published, and are you okay with that? And they were generally fine with it. One thing that surprised me after my mother read that book is she said, I didn't realize that your childhood was not really happy. It just it seemed like, and that wasn't, I sort of think of it as a book that is kind of using comedy to talk about anxiety. So I didn't realize that that kind of sense of trauma was maybe shining through in some of those poems. But it also kind of amazed me that she could have, like, how parents can have a totally different perspective on your childhood than you did growing up. She was like, "Oh yeah, you didn't talk until you were 6, but I thought you seemed good," and I was like, "I was not good." Like, there's a reason. So not as much anxiety about queerness, I don't think, but certainly like it is kind of always really interesting to see how people are going to receive um, things that you've written. And I have a book coming out. It's kind of a creative nonfiction title about the 80s cult film Labyrinth. It's coming out with ECW, the Pop Classic series. And I do have some anxiety about that because I talk a little bit about my relationship with my father in it, which I haven't really done a lot in poetry. And so I did find myself kind of going over, doing a lot of close editing and trying to figure out, you know, what are some ways that I can convey some of these tricky and difficult moments and still be kind, but also critical at the same time. So I think that's kind of something that it's very, very it's really hard to address sometimes, but you just kind of have to go for it.
Shout out to ECW. Any other questions? Yes, awesome.
oh, wait, take that.
This question's for Shamara. The beginning of your book, this is kind of related to the last question. At the beginning of the book, you kind of talk about, you know, names and people may have been altered and may have been omitted altogether. Like I'm paraphrasing something like that. So the question is about process. in the case of omission, do you just omit the whole story? Or like, I guess, if you're omitting a person, does that kind of unravel other threads and create opportunities for maybe creation or creative narrative? How do you kind of reconcile that type of omission or resolve it?
So for example, like, not naming the person,
Not naming the person or omitting them entirely.
right?
Push the button, push the screen.
Yeah, second. So yeah, so for example, say not naming the person or like maybe omitting a story, possibly, right? That maybe might connect to something better, possibly. Well, I guess I just, what happens, so for example, with the therapist, I never actually name any. So, because when we were going through the editing process, they were saying it's confusing because I had more than one. Like often you don't end up having the same therapist kind of at the beginning of your journey and to the end of it, it kind of quite, frankly, I think as you evolve or change, sometimes I remember my psychiatrist said like, just to let you know, like, I don't think you'll be in therapy forever, and that's healthy. She felt it was healthy. She goes, I don't feel it would be ethical to be seeing you for years and years and that you would always need somebody to talk to. So she said, at some point it'll stop. So I didn't name her and I didn't name, because it might jump back and forth too much. So sometimes they were just called the therapist. So it kind of looks like it's the same person, but in fact it wasn't. I had a Jungian therapist, I had a psychiatrist, I've had, it kind of sounds like a big, huge joke. So with the omission of certain things, I think it's just because sometimes certain things were obvious. And again, through the editors, because you know your own story, like I knew my own story, but once you're reading it, I'm filling in the blanks. So the editors would kind of like say, okay, well, there's this, but if you start with this, like for example, about my father, there's a lot of things about my father that I was just starting to know, but this was towards the end of writing Worldly Girls. And honestly, I didn't have the time or space to be able to continue. So she said, I think you should not possibly put them in, but she said, it's up to you. So there's about 3 essays that didn't make it in there. And it just, like you said, like it would just start off kind of on another narrative and maybe not related to kind of what the themes are already in the book. However, they are standalone essays, so they weren't actually meant to be all together, but now they're all together. And of course, there's going to be spaces in between because when you're young and then when you're older and all the things in between. But not everything was worth telling, I guess, a story. So these stories about my dad, because my father was a paper son, and so it's somebody that has purchased papers to come to the country, but it's not their identity, right? And I only found out most of that toward the end of his life. And then with his secret family, we only found out more information toward the end of his life. So I honestly didn't have the time to be able to like also process all of that. And I couldn't talk to him about it. So I did talk to a lot of my family. So does that answer the question?
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you for asking.
There's another one over here. Yeah.
I have a question for Maurice first, and then if we have a lull, I have a question for everybody. If you want to. My question for Maurice is, you have another book with beautiful erotic drawings, pinup. Did you have a lot of consideration for your family when you published that book? Did you think about them? Did you brief anybody on it? And then was it like a hard swallow moment when you did autobiographical erotic illustrations as well? Was that did it feel different? Was it a different consideration to do those two things?
Yeah, so I've published a couple of books of gay erotica, and they're generally with very small presses, and the launches are not like gonna show up on city TV or anything like that. So it was very easy to just leave my parents out of the loop completely about that stuff. And eventually they may have seen some of it, but I didn't invite them to the launch to those books because they just would have been very uncomfortable. And then with the memoir, a lot of the sex scenes are played for laughs, really, in the book, because there's a lot of embarrassing sex that I had. I went through a very long period of like sort of self-imposed celibacy, because I was just so traumatized by that church that we grew up in, plus the AIDS era dawning just as I came out, and then an assault that I had too, and I just felt like I couldn't trust men, and so I just shut down for a long period, and so later when I got into therapy, which is a big part of my book as well, I started to like kind of take it all a little bit less seriously. And when I started dating and with my therapist's encouragement, she kind of helped me. She taught me how to flirt, basically, which I didn't know how to do. And so, but yeah, it's all very awkward, especially like I was in my 30s and I was doing things that most people do when they're a teenager or in their 20s. And so the recipe for disaster is just too great to resist. So and also I just I find maybe a couple of the scenes kind of erotic, but they're mostly played for laughs and there's mostly another point going on, and I don't show cocks in the book. So that was a decision I made to just to not show any of that.
I love Fade to Aquarium.
Thanks. Thanks. Was there
One for
okay.
Yeah, if you wanna go straight. There's a little like undercurrent of religious trauma.
Mhm.
I just wanted to know, like, looking back, what everyone's kind of overarching kind of what you're feeling towards your religious history into one succinct word, what would it be now, and has it evolved?
Shall I begin or yeah? One word is hard, but yeah, when when I tried really hard, you know, to stick with it, even when I realized it was gay. I didn't leave the church till I was about 18. And when I decided to just let it go, I just felt this sort of lightness that I had never felt before. And that has stayed with me ever since then. And there's an image in the book where I'm trying to read the Bible and all the letters start floating off the page. And that's how I felt. Like I felt like I had looked at it so long that I couldn't even see it anymore, the Bible texts. And so yeah, that was my experience of just this total weight coming off of me. And that yeah, hasn't come back. There was other weights, but
For me at the time, it was community, but I've since found new community. And I think if anything, I feel more like less lonely. I think I was a very lonely kid. So I think in some ways, so now I actually feel more happier that I found different kind of community. I have gone back to the church, like or the Kingdom Hall to go to like a function, like a funeral or something like that. And all of a sudden I realized like I couldn't go back. You know, it didn't, none of the things resonated with me anymore. Even the way everybody looked and talked and when they spoke to me, like how I felt was all different and I felt like I was different. And so I actually don't really connect to any church or anything really anymore. You know, I think there's something, but I don't know what that is. And I'm happy kind of in that situation.
yeah, me too.
Well, within the context of my novel, there was actually a scene that I had written and then I don't think it made it into the final manuscript, but it addressed the fact that this heroine, who's loosely inspired by my grandmother, had been baptized as a young girl by was like a wandering preacher who came and sort of dunked the family members' heads in a river, gave them English names. So that was how she became Esther, which was the name that everyone called her during my lifetime. But she had a very playful attitude towards it. No one really went to church in her family. It was just, but it was this sort of sense of like, God is on my side. And I think during her life, when I knew her, it sort of allowed her to find some space outside of and in opposition to her husband's Buddhism and her mother-in-law's Buddhism. The mother-in-law lived with the family as well until she died. And so I think it just sort of gave her like, for her, I think Christianity was maybe just a sort of creative space of whatever she wanted it to be, actually, and made her very sort of outspoken. And I think those aspects, even though I don't deal with that directly in the novel, they certainly informed my understanding of her, and then my representation of this character based on her as an adolescent.
I went back there because I'm used to running around with an extra microphone. Jess, do you have any thoughts on religion or what it means to you and if it informs your work at all?
Oh, sure. Just briefly, like I grew up in Chilliwack, British Columbia, which is kind of widely described as the Bible Belt, the Fraser Valley in British Columbia. Um, but I was in a unique situation because my parents themselves were not religious. My dad was a Buddhist, and so I'm like kind of well aware of that. My mother was kind of agnostic, and so it never, that sense of being in the church, that was never really part of my upbringing, though a lot of my friends were Christian and sort of grappled with their own issues. I did find moving to Saskatchewan, from BC, that the influence of Catholicism and evangelical Christianity is much, much stronger in Saskatchewan than it is in BC. And so I kind of had to find ways to connect with students that were coming from very, very Christian households and also who had grown up in like very small hamlets, like towns of 200 and 300 people, and suddenly they were moving to a big city. And I found after several years that a lot of my students were kind of queer and trans people that were young people that were sort of recovering from religious trauma and from Christian upbringings. And I would kind of sidle in and be like, "Hey, have you heard of queer theology?" And getting them to sort of read more texts about queerness and transness and theology. And I found that to be helpful in kind of bridging that gap, especially when they feel that they've been rejected by their families for religious reasons, like them being able to find a space for themselves as queer religious individuals, I think has actually been really important.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And I love how there's kind of like through lines here between the readers and also what Kirk had said about the religious upbringing as well, like things. And then and also the multimedia, because Maurice did a multimedia thing. And like I love when there's connections throughout. One last call for oh yeah. Yeah, you have to keep this. And I have to go no.
Two. I was looking for basically after the bloom years ago, around the time that you published it, but it wasn't like, it didn't come up in a search, right? So like thematically, I was looking for it, and so it only just recently came across, I came across it, like in December, I read it. So I'm curious, who you would count as your kind of, your literary precedents? Not influences, but precedents.
I would count other Japanese Canadian female authors such as Kari Sakamoto, Joy Kogawa, authors who have also written about the aftermath of the Japanese Canadian and Japanese American internments, and drawn on personal family histories in various ways as sort of creative springboards for exploring that history.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to our final question of the night, which is always one that we pose to you and will be posted on our social medias as a roundup, which is tell us a book recommendation. One book, not your like top 5 or top 10. This is going to be hard. This might be hard. One book only. Something that you've read somewhat recently, doesn't need to be published recently, but you've read it somewhat recently. So it's kind of more fresh in your mind. And yeah, a book. It could be a book of poetry, could be a book of short stories, could be a book of fiction, but something that you would recommend everybody read. He's got one in mind. All right.
I would recommend Susan Choi's Flashlight, which I read quite recently, which is, it opened
with very intriguing scene or sequence of scenes about a Korean professor who disappears from a beach in Japan. So it sort of seems like we might be in like domestic thriller territory, but then the book keeps just sort of transforming into something that really kind of defies genres and explores history, memory, family in a really unique and profound way. It's really tough. But I was talking recently about Unearthing by Kyle McClure, and just in view of like my father's story and then kind of her father's story, I find it really fascinating. Plus, it was broken up into little bits. The book itself is quite big, probably all that's big. Just her kind of figuring out who her real dad was and her actual dad, like her biological dad, and then her dad that she thought was her dad, but it wasn't her dad. So I found that kind of like very like, I don't know, it was very intimate and also a lot about her mom too, that she was getting to know. But I found that a really great book, even though it's not brand new, but.
Early, did you catch the last name for that?
Kyle McClure.
Hi.
Kyle McClure. I think
K
it's-
Y O MCLEAR.
Thank you.
Okay, awesome.
I can't remember the name of it. So we might have to do a Google search on this one, but the author is Helen Humphreys, and she's a wonderful queer Canadian author whose work I adore. And her most recent book is about Henry David Thoreau and Weldon Pond. And it's a very slim, very words.
Followed by the heart.
Followed by the lark. Thank you. It's a very slim book, and each word is kind of chosen like a little ruby or a diamond or something. And it's a very interesting take on 19th century queerness too, because Thoreau apparently had crushes on some guys, and but in the way that he's portrayed in her book, he's just so innocent and he doesn't understand it, and it's very, very touching. And I think she implies that he died a virgin. So it's very, very touching. I just loved it. I wept. Jesus wept.
Jess, final book recommendation of the night.
My recommendation is Bad Cree by Jessica Johns. She's a Cree writer originally from Alberta. And Bad Cree is a horror novel. It's about Cree kinship. It's about the Weedigo. And there is some kind of subtle queerness in it as well. And it's just an excellent read.
Great title.
Want to give me that? I will say our goodbyes.
Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. Woo! Thank you all for being here. Thank you for being here in person. Thank you for being here online. Thank you for being here on Zoom. Thank you very much to Glad Day Bookshop, our venue, and the oldest LGBTQ bookstore in the world. And thanks, of course, to Toronto Arts Council and Access Copyright. Our next show will be March 11th, 2026. We'll have readings from Danila Botha, Pratap Reddy, Ryan Asani Razaki, and Tiff Morris. And as always, we'll have a guest speaker to talk on a topic related to the art, craft, or business of writing. Thank you, everybody. Good night.